The wind howled across the Montana prairie, a relentless force that bent the brittle grass and carried the sharp scent of sagebrush. The sun hung low, casting long shadows over the rugged expanse of the Little Bighorn Valley, where the horizon stretched unbroken save for the jagged outline of distant buttes. The air was heavy with the promise of a storm, a low rumble echoing from the west, where charcoal clouds churned. Dr. Lena Whitefeather, a wildlife biologist with Crow ancestry, paused on the crest of a low rise, her boots crunching against the dry earth. Her breath caught as she scanned the vastness, her dark eyes narrowing against the wind's sting. Something was wrong. Lena, at 42, had spent 2 decades studying the American buffalo, or bison as she preferred to call them, on these ancestral lands. Her grandmother's stories had woven the bison into her soul, symbols of strength, resilience, and the heartbeat of the plains. She'd tracked herds through blizzards, documented their grazing patterns, and fought for their protection against ranchers and poachers. Her weathered field journal, tucked in her backpack, was filled with sketches of their massive forms and notes on their behavior. But nothing had prepared her for what she saw now. A lone buffalo bull stood in the distance, motionless, a dark monolith against the fading light. He was massive, easily 2,000 pounds, his shoulders a broad wall of muscle, his chestnut-brown coat matted with dust and streaked with something darker. Blood. His curved horns gleamed faintly, catching the last rays of sunlight. Lena adjusted her binoculars, her pulse quickening. The bull's head was lowered, his eyes fixed on the ground beneath him, as if guarding something. He didn't move, didn't snort or paw the earth as bison often did when humans approached. That stillness was unnatural. "Easy, big fella," Lena murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. She slung her backpack off her shoulder, retrieving her radio. "Sam, you there? Got a situation out here, about a mile west of the river bend." The radio crackled, and Sam Redhawk's voice came through, laced with static. "What's up, Lena?" "Another stray calf." Sam, a local rancher and occasional volunteer with the tribal wildlife program, had known Lena since they were kids racing horses across these same prairies. "Not a calf," Lena said, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. "A bull. Big one. He's hurt, but he's not moving. Something's off." "Off how?" Sam's tone sharpened. "He's just standing there. Like he's protecting something." Lena lowered the binoculars, her gut twisting. The bull's flanks heaved with labored breaths, and a faint, glistening trail of blood ran down his side, pooling in the dust. But his eyes, dark, liquid, and piercing, held a spark of something she couldn't place. Determination? Fear? Intelligence? "I'm heading your way," Sam said. "Don't get too close. Wounded bulls are no joke." Lena clipped the radio to her belt, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't reckless, but she'd never seen a bison act like this. Most would charge or flee at the sight of a human, especially when injured. This one hadn't even flicked an ear as she approached within 100 yards. Her boots sank into the soft earth as she moved closer, the crunch of grass mingling with the distant roll of thunder. The air smelled of ozone and blood. At 50 yards, she stopped, crouching to study the bull. His coat was thick and woolly, tangled with burrs, but the blood was fresh, seeping from a gash low on his belly. The wound was ugly, jagged, deep, and surrounded by swollen, discolored flesh. Lena's stomach churned. It wasn't a bullet wound or a predator's claw mark. Something else had done this, something unnatural. The bull's massive head dipped lower, his muzzle brushing the ground, and a soft, guttural sound escaped him, a low moan that sent a shiver down her spine. "What's got you so stubborn?" Lena whispered, her breath fogging in the cooling air. She scanned the ground around him, searching for clues. The grass was trampled, the earth scored with hoof marks, but there was something else, a faint, irregular trail leading away from the bull, disappearing into a shallow gully nearby. Her eyes darted back to the buffalo. He hadn't moved, but his gaze flicked toward her, then back to the ground beneath him. It was almost as if he was waiting for her to understand. Lena's heart pounded. She edged closer, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. At 30 yards, she could see the rise and fall of his chest, each breath a struggle. The gash on his belly glistened, and she caught a glimpse of something pale and writhing within it. A grotesque, segmented shape, like a worm or parasite, unnaturally large. Her breath hitched. She'd read about botflies and other parasites affecting livestock, but nothing like this. This was something new, something wrong. The bull snorted softly, his massive head swinging slightly toward her. Lena froze, her hand hovering over the tranquilizer gun at her hip. But he didn't charge. Instead, he took a single, deliberate step to the side, revealing what he'd been guarding. A small, huddled figure lay in the grass, a child, no more than 3 years old, curled into a ball, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She was alive, her chest rising faintly, but her eyes were closed, her tiny hands clutching a tattered blanket. Lena's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. The buffalo's moan grew louder, almost pleading, as if urging her to act. She took a step forward, then another, her eyes darting between the child and the bull. He didn't move, but his gaze followed her, unblinking, filled with a quiet intensity that made her skin prickle. "Lena!" Sam's voice broke through the wind as he crested the rise, his pickup truck parked haphazardly behind him. He jogged toward her, his weathered face paling as he saw the scene. "Is that a kid?" "Yeah," Lena said, her voice tight. "Stay back, Sam. He's hurt, but he's not aggressive. Not yet." Sam stopped, his hands raised. "What the hell's going on? How'd a kid end up out here?" "I don't know," Lena said, her eyes locked on the buffalo. "But he's protecting her. Look at him, he's not moving, even with us here." The bull's ears twitched, and he let out another low moan, his massive body swaying slightly. The worm in his wound writhed, and Lena's stomach twisted. Whatever it was killing him, and yet he stood his ground, shielding the child. She knelt, keeping her distance, and spoke softly. "You're a brave one, aren't you? You saved her." The child stirred, a faint whimper escaping her lips. Lena's heart lurched. She needed to act, but the buffalo's presence was a wild card. His strength was undeniable, 6 feet at the shoulder, his horns sharp enough to gore, his hooves capable of crushing bone. Yet his eyes held no malice, only pain and resolve. "Sam, call for help," Lena said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. "We need a vet, a medic, and a chopper. Now." Sam nodded, fumbling for his radio. As he relayed the situation, Lena edged closer, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. The buffalo's breathing grew shallower, the blood pooling beneath him. The worm, thick, pale, and glistening, seemed to pulse, its movements unnatural and deliberate. Lena's mind raced. Was it a parasite? A mutation? Something else entirely? The child whimpered again, her eyes fluttering open. She saw the buffalo first, her tiny hand reaching out as if to touch his massive leg. The bull lowered his head, his muzzle brushing her blanket, and Lena's breath caught. It was a gesture of protection, of care, that defied everything she knew about wild bison. "Lena, chopper's 20 minutes out," Sam called, his voice tense. "Vet's on the way too. What's that thing in his wound?" "I don't know," Lena admitted, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. "But it's bad. He's in pain, but he's not leaving her." The storm was closer now, the wind carrying the first drops of rain. Lightning flickered, illuminating the buffalo's massive form, his coat slick with blood and dust. Lena's heart ached. This bull, Thunderheart, she decided to call him, had saved a child's life, standing guard despite a wound that should have felled him. But why? And how had the child ended up here, miles from any road or town? As the rain began to fall, Thunderheart let out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed across the prairie, a sound that seemed to carry both pain and defiance. Lena knelt beside the child, her hand hovering over the girl's trembling form, but her eyes stayed on the buffalo. His gaze met hers, and in that moment, she felt a connection, a spark of understanding that transcended species. What had brought this child here, and what was the creature burrowing into Thunderheart's flesh? Lena didn't know, but she was certain of one thing. This buffalo's story was just beginning, and she would see it through. The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the Montana prairie and turning the dry earth to mud. Thunderheart, the massive buffalo bull, stood resolute over the trembling child, his blood-streaked coat glistening under the storm's onslaught. His labored breath sent clouds of steam into the chilly air, each exhale a testament to his faltering strength. The gash on his belly oozed, the grotesque, writhing worm within it pulsing with unnatural vigor. Dr. Lena Whitefeather crouched 20 feet away, her heart pounding as she fought to make sense of the scene. The child's faint whimpers cut through the wind, sharp and urgent, while Thunderheart's dark eyes flicked between Lena and the girl, as if pleading for her to act. "Sam, how far out's the chopper?" Lena called, raising her voice over the storm. Her braid was soaked, clinging to her neck as she shielded her eyes from the rain. Sam Redhawk, standing near his pickup, held the radio close. 15 minutes, maybe less. Vet's closer, Dr. Torres is 10 out. Sheriff's sending a deputy too. He glanced at the buffalo, his face tight with unease. "Lena, that thing in his wound, it's moving. That ain't normal." "I know," Lena said, her voice steady but her mind racing. She'd seen parasites before, botflies, ticks, even warbles, but nothing like this. The worm was thick as her thumb, its pale, segmented body twisting in the open wound like it was feeding, or worse, burrowing deeper. Thunderheart's massive frame shuddered, his hooves sinking into the mud, yet he didn't budge from his protective stance over the child. Lena inched closer, her boots slipping on the slick grass. The air smelled of wet earth, blood, and something acrid, almost chemical, emanating from the buffalo's wound. She studied his behavior, her years of wildlife training kicking in. Bison were unpredictable, especially when injured, but Thunderheart's stillness was deliberate. His low, rumbling moans carried a rhythm, almost like a communication, directed at the child or perhaps at her. His ears twitched, catching the sound of her approach, but he didn't charge. Instead, he shifted slightly, his massive shoulder blocking the wind from the girl's tiny form. "Lena, careful," Sam warned, his hand hovering near the rifle slung across his back. "He's hurt, but he's still a ton of muscle." "He's not gonna hurt me," Lena said, her voice firm but soft. She met Thunderheart's gaze, those deep, liquid eyes holding a spark of something she couldn't name, intelligence, trust, or maybe desperation. "He's trying to tell us something." The child stirred again, her small hand clutching the tattered blanket. Her eyes opened fully now, wide and frightened, locking onto Thunderheart's massive head looming above her. She didn't scream, didn't cry out, just stared, as if the buffalo's presence was her only anchor in the storm. Lena's chest tightened. How had a toddler ended up here, miles from any road, in the middle of a remote prairie? And why was Thunderheart, a wild animal, risking his life to protect her? A low growl of an engine broke through the rain, and headlights cut through the dusk. Dr. Maria Torres, the region's top wildlife veterinarian, pulled up in a mud-splattered jeep. She leapt out, her medical bag slung over her shoulder, her dark hair plastered to her face. "Lena, what we got?" she called, jogging toward them. "Wounded bull, bad gash on his belly," Lena said, not taking her eyes off Thunderheart. "Something's in the wound, a worm, maybe a parasite, but it's huge. And he's guarding a kid. A toddler." Maria froze mid-step, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "A kid? Out here?" She knelt beside Lena, her gaze darting to the child, then to the buffalo. "That's not possible." "It's happening," Lena said. "He's not moving, but he's hurting. We need to get to the girl, but we can't spook him." Maria nodded, setting her bag down and pulling out a flashlight. She aimed it at Thunderheart's wound, the beam illuminating the writhing, pale shape within. "Dios mío," she muttered. "That's no botfly. It's too big, too active." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "It's almost like it's reacting to the light." Thunderheart snorted, his massive head swinging toward Maria. She froze, but Lena raised a hand, her voice calm. "Easy, big guy. We're here to help." To her surprise, the buffalo stilled, his breathing heavy but his eyes fixed on her. It was as if he understood her intent, if not her words. "Sam, get a tarp from your truck," Lena said. "We need to shield the kid from the rain." Sam nodded and ran back to his pickup, his boots splashing through the mud. Maria edged closer, her flashlight steady. "Lena, this bull's in bad shape. That wound's infected, and whatever's in there is making it worse. We need to sedate him to treat him, but if he's protecting the kid—" "We don't sedate him yet," Lena said firmly. "Not until we get her out. He's not aggressive, but he's not leaving her side." Sam returned, dragging a tarp. Together, they stretched it over a makeshift frame of branches, creating a small shelter above the child. The girl whimpered again, her tiny voice barely audible. "Big cow," she mumbled, her hand reaching toward Thunderheart's leg. Lena's heart clenched. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, crouching as close as she dared. "We're gonna get you safe, okay? He's watching out for you." The child's eyes flicked to her, then back to the buffalo, a flicker of trust in her gaze. Maria whispered, "Lena, look at his tracks." She pointed to the mud around Thunderheart's hooves. A faint trail of churned earth led from the buffalo's position to the gully nearby, where the grass was flattened, as if something heavy had been dragged. "He didn't just find her here. He brought her here." Lena followed the trail with her eyes, her mind racing. The gully was shallow, overgrown with sagebrush, but there were signs of disturbance: broken branches, scuffed earth, and a single, small shoe half buried in the mud. Her breath caught. "Sam, check the gully. Carefully." Sam nodded, grabbing a flashlight and heading toward the gully. Lena stayed with Maria, her eyes on Thunderheart. The buffalo's moans grew softer, almost rhythmic, as if he were comforting the child. His massive body swayed, the worm in his wound twisting visibly now, its movements jerky and unnatural. Lena's stomach churned. Whatever it was killing him, and yet he stood firm, his strength a defiance of his pain. "Lena!" Sam's voice echoed from the gully, sharp with alarm. He emerged, his face pale, holding a tattered backpack, child-sized and soaked through. "There's more down there. Blankets, a water bottle, and blood. Not a lot, but it's fresh." Lena's pulse spiked. Human blood. Sam nodded grimly. "Looks like it. No body, though. Just signs of a struggle." Maria's eyes widened. "A struggle? Out here? Lena, this kid didn't wander off. Someone left her, or something happened." Lena's mind spun. The prairie was vast, remote, with no towns for miles. The nearest road was a dirt track used by ranchers, and even that was a half-hour drive. A child this young couldn't have walked here alone. And Thunderheart, how had he found her? Why was he protecting her, risking his life despite the parasite eating away at him? The sound of rotors cut through the storm, and headlights flashed as the sheriff's deputy arrived, followed by the distant thrum of the medical chopper. Deputy Clara Evans, a no-nonsense woman with a decade on the force, jogged toward them, her face grim. "Lena, what's going on? Dispatch said you've got a kid and a wounded buffalo." "Yeah," Lena said, gesturing to Thunderheart and the child. "He's guarding her. She's alive, but we don't know how she got here. And he's hurt bad, some kind of parasite in his wound." Clara's eyes widened as she took in the scene. Jesus! That's not something you see every day. She knelt beside the tarp, her voice softening. "Hey, little one. You okay?" The child didn't respond, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. Maria spoke up, her voice urgent. "Lena, we need to move fast. That worm, it's not just a parasite. It's too big, too aggressive. I've never seen anything like it. If we don't get it out soon, he's not gonna make it." Lena nodded, her eyes on Thunderheart. His breathing was shallower now, his massive frame trembling with the effort of standing. Yet his gaze remained steady, locked on the child, then shifting to Lena as if urging her to act. She felt a surge of awe. This buffalo, in agony, was defying every instinct to protect a human child. His intelligence, his compassion, was undeniable. "Clara, Help Sam secure the area, Lena said. Maria, prep what you need to stabilize him, but we get the kid out first. She's our priority. As the chopper's lights pierced the rain, Lena knelt closer to the child, her voice soft but firm. We're gonna take you somewhere safe, okay? He's been watching over you, but we'll take care of him too. She glanced at Thunderheart, her heart heavy. The worm in his wound writhed faster now, as if sensing the approaching intervention. Thunderheart let out a deep, resonant bellow, his voice echoing through the storm. The child reached out again, her tiny hand brushing his leg, and he lowered his head, his muzzle grazing her blanket. Lena's breath caught. This wasn't just a buffalo. This was a guardian, a sentinel, and his story was far from over. But as the chopper descended, its roar drowning out the storm, a new question burned in Lena's mind. What had left that child in the wilderness, and what was the creature burrowing into Thunderheart's flesh? The answers, she knew, would change everything. The storm raged over the little Bighorn Valley, rain lashing the prairie and turning the earth into a slick mire. Thunderheart stood resolute, his massive frame a dark silhouette against the flickering lightning, his blood-soaked coat glistening. The grotesque worm in his belly wound writhed, its pale, segmented body pulsing with unnatural vigor, yet the buffalo bull remained steadfast over the trembling child. Dr. Lena Whitefeather's heart pounded as she crouched under the tarp, her eyes locked on the toddler's pale face and the buffalo's unyielding gaze. The chopper's roar grew louder, its lights cutting through the downpour, but time was running out. Lena, we've got maybe 10 minutes before this storm grounds the chopper, Deputy Clara Evans shouted, her voice barely audible over the wind. She stood with Sam Redhawk near the gully, their flashlights sweeping the mud for clues. We need to get that kid out now. I know, Lena called back, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. She glanced at Dr. Maria Torres, who was unpacking her medical kit under the tarp, her hands steady but her face taut with worry. Maria, can you stabilize the kid enough to move her? Maria nodded, her flashlight trained on the child. She's dehydrated, maybe hypothermic, but she's responsive. I can wrap her in a thermal blanket and carry her to the chopper. But that buffalo, she trailed off, her eyes flicking to Thunderheart. The bull's massive head was lowered, his curved horns glinting, his breaths coming in short, pained huffs. The worm in his wound seemed to pulse faster, as if sensing the chaos. He's not gonna let us near her unless we earn his trust, Lena said, her voice low. She'd spent years studying bison behavior, learning their cues, the flick of an ear, the pawing of a hoof, the subtle shift of weight that signaled a charge. Thunderheart showed none of those. His eyes, dark and piercing, held a quiet intensity, locked on Lena as if weighing her intentions. She felt a surge of awe. This wasn't just instinct. This was intelligence, maybe even compassion. Sam, Clara, keep the perimeter clear, Lena said, inching closer to the child. Maria, stay ready with the blanket. I'm gonna try to get to her. Lena, you're crazy, Sam muttered, gripping his flashlight tighter. He's a ton of pissed-off buffalo with a parasite eating him alive. He's not pissed off, Lena said, her voice firm. He's protecting her. Look at him, he's in pain, but he's not charging. He wants us to help. The child whimpered, her tiny hand clutching the tattered blanket, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart's massive form. Big cow, she mumbled again, her voice faint but clear. The buffalo let out a soft, rumbling moan, his muzzle brushing the ground near her, a gesture so gentle it sent a shiver down Lena's spine. Lena took a deep breath, her boots sinking into the mud as she moved closer, now just 10 feet from Thunderheart. The air was thick with the scent of wet fur, blood, and that acrid, chemical tang from the wound. Her heart raced, every instinct screaming to back away from a 2,000-pound animal that could crush her with a single charge. But she saw the spark in his eyes, the way his ears twitched toward her voice, and she knew she had to try. Hey, big guy, she said softly, her hands raised, palms open. I'm not here to hurt her. I know you've been keeping her safe. Let me help you both. Her voice was steady, almost a song, the way her grandmother had taught her to speak to the animals of the plains. Thunderheart's ears flicked, and he shifted his weight, his massive hooves grinding into the mud. The worm in his wound writhed violently, and he snorted, a cloud of steam bursting from his nostrils. Lena froze, her breath catching, but he didn't charge. Instead, he took a single, deliberate step to the side, his body still shielding the child but leaving a narrow path for Lena to approach. "Holy shit," Maria whispered, her flashlight trembling. "He's letting you in." Lena's pulse thundered in her ears, but she moved forward, slow and deliberate, her eyes never leaving Thunderheart's. The rain stung her face, the wind howling, but she felt a strange calm, as if the buffalo's presence anchored her. At 5 feet, she could see the child clearly, her dirt-streaked face, her tangled hair, her tiny chest rising with shallow breaths. Lena knelt, her hands hovering over the girl, and spoke softly. "Hey, sweetheart. We're gonna get you warm and safe, okay?" The child's eyes flicked to her, then back to Thunderheart, a flicker of trust in her gaze. Lena glanced at the buffalo, his massive head lowered, his eyes locked on her. The worm in his wound pulsed, and a fresh trickle of blood ran down his flank, pooling in the mud. Lena's stomach twisted. He was fading, his strength ebbing, yet he stood firm. "Maria now," Lena said, her voice urgent but calm. Maria slid forward, the thermal blanket ready, and gently wrapped it around the child. The girl whimpered, reaching for Thunderheart, but Maria's hands were quick, lifting her carefully from the mud. Thunderheart snorted, his massive body tensing, and Lena's heart lurched. "Easy, big guy," she said, stepping between him and Maria. "She's safe. We've got her." To her astonishment, the buffalo's ears relaxed, and he let out a low, almost relieved moan, his head dipping lower. Maria carried the child to the tarp, where Clara was waiting with a medical kit. "She's stable enough for the chopper," Maria said, her voice tight. "But we need to move fast." Lena nodded, her eyes still on Thunderheart. The chopper was landing now, its rotors kicking up mud and grass, its lights blinding. The child was safe, but the buffalo's condition was worsening. The worm in his wound was moving faster, its pale body glistening under the flashlight's beam, and his breaths were ragged, each one a struggle. "Maria, what do we do for him?" Lena asked, her voice breaking. "That thing's killing him." Maria knelt beside her bag, pulling out a sedative dart and a surgical kit. "We need to sedate him to get that worm out, but it's risky. He's lost a lot of blood, and that parasite. I don't even know what it is. It's not acting like anything I've seen." Lena's mind raced. Sedating Thunderheart could save him, but it could also spook him, breaking the fragile trust they'd built. She looked into his eyes, saw the pain and resolve there, and made a decision. "No dart yet. Let's try to calm him first." "Lena, that's insane," Clara said, jogging back from the chopper. "We've got the kid loaded, but we can't wait forever. The storm's getting worse." "I know," Lena said, her voice steady. She stepped closer to Thunderheart, her hands still raised. "Big guy, you've done your job. You saved her. Let us help you now." She reached out, her fingers brushing the air just inches from his woolly coat. It was a reckless move, one that could end with a horn through her chest, but she felt a connection, a trust that defied logic. To everyone's shock, Thunderheart didn't flinch. He let out a deep, resonant bellow, his head lowering until his muzzle was level with Lena's hand. She touched his coat, her fingers sinking into the thick, wet fur, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the storm seemed to fade, the world narrowing to just the two of them. "Maria now," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. Maria moved swiftly, sliding a sedative needle into Thunderheart's flank. The buffalo snorted but didn't resist, his massive body swaying as the drug took effect. Lena kept her hand on his coat, her voice soothing. "You're gonna be okay, Thunderheart. We're not giving up on you." As the sedative kicked in, Thunderheart's legs buckled, and he sank to the ground, his massive form settling into the mud with a heavy thud. Maria rushed forward, her surgical kit open, and began probing the wound. The worm writhed violently, its pale body twisting as she exposed it to the light. "This isn't natural," she muttered, her voice trembling. "It's segmented, but it's got some kind of structure. Like it's engineered." Lena's blood ran cold. Engineered. Maria didn't answer, her focus on extracting the worm. The chopper's crew rushed forward with a stretcher for Thunderheart, but Lena's mind was elsewhere. The child was safe, carried to the chopper, but questions burned hotter than ever. Who had left her here? What was this creature in Thunderheart's wound? And how had a wild buffalo known to protect her, risking his life against an unnatural parasite? As the crew secured Thunderheart for transport, Lena looked at the gully, where Sam's flashlight still swept the darkness. The answers were out there, hidden in the mud and rain, and she wouldn't rest until she found them. The storm had passed, leaving the little Bighorn Valley cloaked in a damp, quiet dawn. The prairie glistened under the first rays of sunlight, the air sharp with the scent of wet sagebrush and churned earth. Dr. Lena Whitefeather stood outside a temporary enclosure at the Tribal Wildlife Center, her boots caked with mud, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. The massive buffalo bull lay on a bed of straw, his chestnut-brown coat cleaned of blood and grime, his breathing steady but shallow. The gash on his belly was bandaged, the grotesque worm removed, but the memory of its writhing, pale form haunted Lena. She clutched her field journal, its pages filled with sketches of Thunderheart's powerful form and notes on his extraordinary behavior. Dr. Maria Torres emerged from the enclosure, wiping her hands on a towel, her face etched with exhaustion. "He's stable," she said, her voice low. "The sedative's wearing off, and the antibiotics are working. That wound was deep, but he's a fighter. He'll pull through." Lena nodded, her gaze never leaving Thunderheart. His massive head rested on the straw, his curved horns catching the light. His eyes, though heavy with fatigue, held that same spark of intelligence she'd seen on the prairie, a quiet resolve that had kept him standing over the child despite the parasite eating away at him. "What about the worm?" Lena asked, her voice tight. "You said it was engineered?" Maria hesitated, glancing at the cooler beside her, where the writhing creature had been sealed in a sterile container. "I sent samples to the lab in Bozeman. It's not a known parasite. The segmentation, the size, the way it reacted to light, it's not natural. I've seen botflies, warbles, even exotic parasites, but this? It's something else. Maybe a mutation, maybe something man-made." Lena's stomach twisted. "Man-made? You're saying someone did this to him?" Maria shrugged, her expression grim. "I don't know yet. But it wasn't random. That thing was burrowing with purpose, like it was designed to weaken him without killing him outright." Lena's mind raced, her fingers tightening around her journal. Thunderheart had saved a child's life, standing guard despite the agony of that creature in his flesh. Now, the possibility that his suffering was deliberate felt like a betrayal of the land itself. She glanced at the enclosure, where Thunderheart shifted slightly, his ears twitching at the sound of her voice. "He knew," she said softly. "He knew she needed him." Maria nodded, her eyes softening. "I've never seen a bison act like that. Protective, yes, but not like this. He trusted you, Lena. That's rare." The crunch of tires on gravel drew their attention. Deputy Clara Evans pulled up in her patrol car, followed by a van marked with the logo of the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks Department. Clara stepped out, her face tense but professional. "Lena, Maria, we've got news on the kid. And complications." Lena's heart skipped. "She's okay, right?" "She's stable," Clara said, adjusting her hat. "She's at the hospital in Billings. Dehydrated, a few scrapes, but she'll be fine. Her name's Ellie, 3 years old. No ID on her, but we found a missing persons report from a town 80 miles east. Parents reported her gone 2 days ago. Story's murky, though. Sounds like they were on the run." "On the run." Lena frowned, her mind flashing to the tattered backpack Sam had found in the gully. "From what?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Not sure yet. Domestic situation, maybe. The parents aren't talking much, but the father's got a record. Petty theft, nothing violent. We're digging deeper. What's weird is how Ellie ended up out here, miles from anywhere. And that buffalo," she trailed off, glancing at Thunderheart's enclosure. "That's not normal." Sam Redhawk, who'd been tending to the enclosure's gate, joined them, his face grim. "I checked the gully again this morning. Found tire tracks, fresh ones, heavy vehicle, maybe a truck. Someone was out there, Lena. They didn't just abandon her. They left her in a hurry." Lena's chest tightened. The prairie was vast, unforgiving, no place for a child to survive alone. Thunderheart had found her, protected her, but how? And why was he targeted by something as unnatural as that worm? She turned to the wildlife van, where Dr. James Carter, a geneticist from the State University, was unloading equipment. "Dr. Carter, any chance you can tell us more about Thunderheart?" she asked. Carter, a wiry man with glasses perched on his nose, nodded. "I've been studying bison populations in the region. Your bull here, he's unique. Preliminary blood work shows he's part of a rare genetic lineage, one we thought was nearly extinct. Stronger immune system, larger body mass. If that parasite was deliberate, someone might have targeted him because of his genetics." Lena's breath caught. "Targeted? Why?" Carter shrugged, setting up a portable DNA sequencer. "Could be poaching, could be something else. Bison like him are valuable. Private collectors, biotech firms, even black market trade. His DNA could be worth a fortune." The idea hit Lena like a punch. Thunderheart, a symbol of the plains' resilience, reduced to a commodity? She looked at him, his coat regaining its luster under the morning light, his massive shoulders rising with each breath. He'd fought to protect a child, and now he was fighting to survive. She felt a surge of protectiveness, a bond forged in that stormy moment when he'd let her touch his fur. Maria interrupted, her voice urgent. "Lena, he's waking up. Come see." Inside the enclosure, Thunderheart stirred, his massive head lifting from the straw. His eyes found Lena's, and he let out a low, rumbling moan, almost a greeting. Lena knelt beside him, her hand resting on the fence, her voice soft. "Hey, big guy. You're doing great." To her surprise, he shifted closer, his muzzle brushing the fence near her hand, a gesture of trust that made her heart ache. "He knows you," Maria said, her voice tinged with awe. "That's not just instinct. He's bonding with you." Lena nodded, her throat tight. She'd spent her career studying bison, but Thunderheart was different. His intelligence, his compassion, went beyond anything she'd documented. She opened her journal, sketching his face, the curve of his horns, the depth of his eyes, knowing his story was bigger than this moment. Clara's radio crackled, and she stepped away to answer it. When she returned, her face was pale. "Lena, we've got media incoming." A reporter from Billings caught wind of the story. Child saved by a buffalo parasite attack. "They're calling it a miracle." Fish and Wildlife's getting calls from national outlets too. Lena's stomach churned. The attention could help Thunderheart, maybe secure funding for his care, but it also risked turning his story into a spectacle. "We need to control this," she said. "He's not a sideshow. He's special." Carter looked up from his equipment, his eyes sharp. "If his genetics are as unique as I think, this could change things. Bison conservation, wildlife policy, it could put pressure on the state to protect herds like his. But we need to keep him safe while we investigate." Sam nodded, his voice gruff. "I've got ranchers asking questions too. Some think he's dangerous, others think he's a hero." Words spreading fast. Lena looked at Thunderheart, his massive form steady now, his breathing stronger. The bandage on his belly was clean, but the memory of that worm lingered, a dark question mark. She thought of Ellie, safe in the hospital, and the mystery of her abandonment. The tire tracks, the blood in the gully, the worm. All pieces of a puzzle that pointed to something bigger, something human. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the enclosure, Lena felt a resolve settle in her chest. Thunderheart had saved a life, and now she would fight for his. She touched the fence, her fingers inches from his coat, and whispered, "We're not done yet, big guy." But as the media vans rolled in, their cameras glinting in the distance, a new challenge loomed. The world was watching, and Thunderheart's story was about to take on a life of its own. Lena glanced at the gully, where the tire tracks lay hidden, and knew the truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. The late summer sun bathed the little Bighorn Valley in a golden glow, the prairie stretching wide and vibrant under a cloudless sky. Dr. Lena Whitefeather stood at the edge of a newly established bison preserve, her boots sinking into the soft earth, her field journal tucked under her arm. The air carried the sweet scent of clover and the distant bellows of a small bison herd grazing across the rolling hills. At the center of the preserve, Thunderheart stood tall, his massive frame a testament to resilience. His chestnut-brown coat gleamed, the bandage on his belly replaced by a faint scar, his curved horns catching the sunlight. His eyes, deep and knowing, followed Lena as she approached, a spark of recognition in their depths. 3 weeks had passed since the stormy night when Thunderheart had guarded little Ellie, defying a parasitic worm to protect her. The media frenzy had exploded, headlines calling him the Guardian Buffalo and Montana's Miracle Bison. Lena had shielded him from the chaos, working with the Tribal Wildlife Center and Dr. James Carter to secure this preserve, a 500-acre sanctuary funded by a surge of public donations and a state grant. But the victory felt fragile, the mystery of Ellie's abandonment and the worm's origin still unresolved. Lena leaned against the wooden fence, her voice soft. "You're looking good, Thunderheart." The buffalo snorted gently, his massive head dipping as he ambled closer, his hooves thudding against the earth. He stopped just inches from the fence, his warm breath brushing her hand, and nudged her fingers with his muzzle. The gesture, so deliberate and gentle, sent a warmth through her chest. She'd spent her life studying bison, but Thunderheart had rewritten her understanding of their intelligence, their capacity for connection. Dr. Maria Torres joined her, her medical bag slung over her shoulder. "He's thriving," Maria said, a smile breaking through her usual intensity. "His blood works clean, scars healing well. Whatever that worm was, it didn't leave lasting damage. He's strong as ever." Lena nodded, her eyes tracing Thunderheart's powerful shoulders. "He's more than strong. He's different. The way he protected Ellie, the way he trusted me, it's like he knew what was at stake." Maria's expression softened. "I've been thinking about that. His behavior, his genetics, Carter's data confirms he's from a rare lineage. Higher cognitive markers, maybe even emotional capacity we haven't fully studied in bison. He's a game changer, Lena." The thought lingered as Lena glanced across the preserve, where a small group of researchers from the state university were setting up observation equipment. Thunderheart's story had sparked a scientific firestorm. Dr. Carter's preliminary findings on his DNA had led to a funded study on bison cognition, with Thunderheart as the centerpiece. Conservation groups were pushing for expanded protections for wild herds, citing his actions as evidence of their ecological and cultural value. Lena felt a swell of pride but also a weight. She'd become Thunderheart's advocate, her life now tied to his legacy. Deputy Clara Evans approached, her patrol car parked nearby. "Lena, we've got an update on Ellie," she said, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Her parents are in custody. Domestic violence situation. They were fleeing an abusive relative. The father left Ellie in the prairie, thinking she'd be safer away from the conflict. It's a mess, but she's with a foster family now, doing okay." Lena's heart clenched. "He left her out there? Alone?" Clara nodded grimly. "Thought it was temporary, said he'd come back. Didn't count on a buffalo finding her first. We're still tracing those tire tracks. Looks like they belong to a truck registered to a biotech outfit in Wyoming. Shady operation, no clear ties to the worm yet, but we're digging." The mention of the worm sent a chill through Lena. The lab in Bozeman had confirmed Maria's suspicions. The parasite wasn't natural. Its structure suggested genetic modification, possibly linked to experimental pest control or worse, targeted sabotage of valuable wildlife. The biotech angle was troubling, but evidence was thin, and the investigation was moving slowly. Lena's jaw tightened. Whoever had done this to Thunderheart would answer for it. She turned back to the buffalo, who was now grazing lazily, his massive head dipping to tear at the grass. A group of schoolchildren, part of a tribal education program, watched from a safe distance, their voices bubbling with excitement. One girl, no older than Ellie, pointed at Thunderheart, whispering to her teacher, "Is that the hero buffalo?" Lena smiled, her heart lifting. Thunderheart was more than a hero, he was a bridge, connecting people to the land, to the legacy of the bison her ancestors had revered. "Lena!" Sam Redhawk's voice called from the preserve's gate. He jogged over, his face lit with rare enthusiasm. "You've got to see this. The tribal council just approved a plan to expand the preserve. Thunderheart's story, they're saying it's a wake-up call. They want to bring back more bison, restore the old migration routes." Lena's breath caught. That's huge. For years, she'd fought for bison conservation, battling ranchers' complaints about grazing land and bureaucratic red tape. Thunderheart's story had shifted the conversation, his compassion for a human child resonating across communities. She looked at him, his massive form moving with quiet strength, and felt a surge of purpose. He'd given her a new mission. As the day wore on, Lena joined the researchers, sharing her observations of Thunderheart's behavior. They marveled at his interactions, how he'd pause to watch her approach, how he'd respond to her voice with a soft rumble, how he'd stand protectively near the herd's younger calves. "It's like he's teaching us," one researcher said, scribbling notes. "His emotional intelligence, it's unprecedented." By late afternoon, the preserve buzzed with activity. A local news crew arrived, filming Thunderheart from a respectful distance, while a tribal elder led a small ceremony, blessing the land and the buffalo who'd reclaimed it. Lena stood beside Thunderheart's enclosure, her hand resting on the fence. He ambled over, his massive head lowering until his muzzle brushed her fingers again. She felt the warmth of his breath, the roughness of his coat, and a quiet understanding passed between them. "You changed everything, big guy," she whispered, her voice thick. "You showed us what's possible." Her own transformation was undeniable. Lena had always been driven, her career a tribute to her grandmother's stories of the bison's sacred role. But Thunderheart had awakened something deeper, a belief in the power of connection, across species, across time. She'd been haunted by doubts, by the endless fight to protect a dwindling wilderness, but now she felt renewed, ready to carry his story forward. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the preserve, a final visitor arrived. A social worker stepped out of a car, holding the hand of a small girl. Ellie, her face clean now, her eyes bright. Lena's heart leaped. The girl ran to the fence, her foster mother trailing behind, and pressed her hands against the wood. "Big cow," she called, her voice clear and joyful. Dr. Maria Torres joined her, her medical bag slung over her shoulder. "He's thriving," Maria said, a smile breaking through her usual intensity. "His blood works clean, scars healing well. Whatever that worm was, it didn't leave lasting damage. He's strong as ever." Lena nodded, her eyes tracing Thunderheart's powerful shoulders. "He's more than strong. He's different. The way he protected Ellie, the way he trusted me, it's like he knew what was at stake." Maria's expression softened. "I've been thinking about that. His behavior, his genetics. Carter's data confirms he's from a rare lineage. Higher cognitive markers, maybe even emotional capacity we haven't fully studied in bison. He's a game changer, Lena." The thought lingered as Lena glanced across the preserve, where a small group of researchers from the state university were setting up observation equipment. Thunderheart's story had sparked a scientific firestorm. Dr. Carter's preliminary findings on his DNA had led to a funded study on bison cognition, with Thunderheart as the centerpiece. Conservation groups were pushing for expanded protections for wild herds, citing his actions as evidence of their ecological and cultural value. Lena felt a swell of pride but also a weight. She'd become Thunderheart's advocate, her life now tied to his legacy. Deputy Clara Evans approached, her patrol car parked nearby. "Lena, we've got an update on Ellie," she said, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Her parents are in custody. Domestic violence situation. They were fleeing an abusive relative. The father left Ellie in the prairie, thinking she'd be safer away from the conflict. It's a mess, but she's with a foster family now, Doing okay. Lena's heart clenched. He left her out there? Alone. Clara nodded grimly. Thought it was temporary, said he'd come back. Didn't count on a buffalo finding her first. We're still tracing those tire tracks. Looks like they belong to a truck registered to a biotech outfit in Wyoming. Shady operation, no clear ties to the worm yet, but we're digging. The mention of the worm sent a chill through Lena. The lab in Bozeman had confirmed Maria's suspicions. The parasite wasn't natural. Its structure suggested genetic modification, possibly linked to experimental pest control or worse, targeted sabotage of valuable wildlife. The biotech angle was troubling, but evidence was thin, and the investigation was moving slowly. Lena's jaw tightened. Whoever had done this to Thunderheart would answer for it. She turned back to the buffalo, who was now grazing lazily, his massive head dipping to tear at the grass. A group of schoolchildren, part of a tribal education program, watched from a safe distance, their voices bubbling with excitement. One girl, no older than Ellie, pointed at Thunderheart, whispering to her teacher, "Is that the hero buffalo?" Lena smiled, her heart lifting. Thunderheart was more than a hero. He was a bridge, connecting people to the land, to the legacy of the bison her ancestors had revered. "Lena!" Sam Redhawk's voice called from the preserve's gate. He jogged over, his face lit with rare enthusiasm. "You've got to see this. The tribal council just approved a plan to expand the preserve. Thunderheart's story, they're saying it's a wake-up call. They want to bring back more bison, restore the old migration routes." Lena's breath caught. That's huge. For years, she'd fought for bison conservation, battling ranchers' complaints about grazing land and bureaucratic red tape. Thunderheart's story had shifted the conversation, his compassion for a human child resonating across communities. She looked at him, his massive form moving with quiet strength, and felt a surge of purpose. He'd given her a new mission. As the day wore on, Lena joined the researchers, sharing her observations of Thunderheart's behavior. They marveled at his interactions, how he'd pause to watch her approach, how he'd respond to her voice with a soft rumble, how he'd stand protectively near the herd's younger calves. "It's like he's teaching us," one researcher said, scribbling notes. "His emotional intelligence, it's unprecedented." By late afternoon, the preserve buzzed with activity. A local news crew arrived, filming Thunderheart from a respectful distance, while a tribal elder led a small ceremony, blessing the land and the buffalo who'd reclaimed it. Lena stood beside Thunderheart's enclosure, her hand resting on the fence. He ambled over, his massive head lowering until his muzzle brushed her fingers again. She felt the warmth of his breath, the roughness of his coat, and a quiet understanding passed between them. "You changed everything, big guy," she whispered, her voice thick. "You showed us what's possible." Her own transformation was undeniable. Lena had always been driven, her career a tribute to her grandmother's stories of the bison's sacred role. But Thunderheart had awakened something deeper, a belief in the power of connection, across species, across time. She'd been haunted by doubts, by the endless fight to protect a dwindling wilderness, but now she felt renewed, ready to carry his story forward. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the preserve, a final visitor arrived. A social worker stepped out of a car, holding the hand of a small girl. Ellie, her face clean now, her eyes bright. Lena's heart leaped. The girl ran to the fence, her foster mother trailing behind, and pressed her hands against the wood. "Big cow," she called, her voice clear and joyful. Thunderheart lifted his head, his ears twitching. He lumbered toward the fence, his massive form casting a shadow over Ellie, and let out a low, resonant bellow. The girl giggled, unafraid, and reached through the fence, her tiny fingers brushing his coat. Lena knelt beside her, tears stinging her eyes. "He remembers you," she said softly. The foster mother smiled, her voice gentle. "She talks about him all the time. Says he kept her safe." Lena nodded, her throat tight. The moment felt like a promise, a bond forged in crisis, now a symbol of hope. Thunderheart's story had rippled outward, inspiring a new preserve, a scientific study, a community's pride. But for Lena, it was personal. He'd shown her the strength of trust, the power of compassion. As Ellie and her foster mother left, Lena stayed by the fence, watching Thunderheart rejoin the herd. The other bison parted for him, their heads dipping in what seemed like respect. The researchers were already planning a long-term study, the tribal council drafting proposals for more sanctuaries. Thunderheart's legacy was growing, but so was the shadow of the biotech mystery. Lena knew the fight wasn't over. The truth about the worm and Ellie's abandonment still lay hidden. She opened her journal, sketching Thunderheart's silhouette against the sunset, and made a silent vow. She'd protect him, uncover the truth, and ensure his story endured. The prairie stretched before her, alive with possibility, and she felt ready for whatever came next. The Little Bighorn Valley lay serene under a late autumn sky, the prairie awash in hues of gold and crimson as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of frost-kissed grass and the distant rumble of bison hooves. Dr. Lena Whitefeather stood on a low rise, her field journal tucked under her arm, her eyes fixed on the Thunderheart Preserve. Below, the massive buffalo bull, Thunderheart, grazed among his herd, his chestnut-brown coat glowing in the fading light. His scar was barely visible now, a faint line beneath his thick fur, a testament to his survival. His curved horns caught the last rays of sunlight, and his deep, resonant bellow echoed across the valley, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the plains themselves. A year had passed since that stormy night when Thunderheart had stood guard over little Ellie, defying a grotesque, engineered parasite to protect her. His story had spread far beyond Montana, becoming a beacon for conservationists, scientists, and communities across the nation. The preserve, now 1,000 acres strong, was a living tribute to his courage, a sanctuary for bison and a center for research into their intelligence and ecological role. Lena's heart swelled as she watched Thunderheart move with quiet strength, his massive shoulders parting the grass, his eyes occasionally flicking toward her, as if acknowledging their shared journey. The mystery of Ellie's abandonment had been unraveled, though not without pain. The biotech company tied to the tire tracks had been exposed as part of an illegal operation testing genetically modified parasites on wildlife, targeting rare species like Thunderheart for their valuable DNA. The investigation, spurred by Lena's relentless advocacy and Deputy Clara Evans' dogged police work, had led to arrests and a federal inquiry. The company's collapse was a victory, but the scars it left, on Thunderheart, on Ellie, on the land, reminded Lena of the fragility of their world. Ellie, now 4, thrived with her foster family, visiting the preserve often. She'd named Thunderheart her big cow, a title that brought smiles to everyone who heard it. A small plaque at the preserve's entrance bore her words, alongside Thunderheart's name, commemorating the bond that had sparked a movement. Lena glanced at the plaque now, its bronze surface glinting in the dusk. To Thunderheart, guardian of the plains, and Ellie, his light. May their story inspire us all. Dr. Maria Torres joined Lena on the rise, her breath fogging in the cool air. He's the king out there, Maria said, nodding toward Thunderheart. The herd follows him like he's their anchor. And the research, Carter's team published their first paper on bison cognition. Thunderheart's data is rewriting what we thought we knew. Lena smiled, her fingers tracing the edge of her journal. The study had confirmed Thunderheart's rare genetic lineage and hinted at heightened emotional intelligence in bison, sparking global interest. Conservation policies were shifting, new protections for wild herds, funding for tribal-led sanctuaries, and a national campaign to restore bison migration routes. Thunderheart had become an ambassador, his image on posters and documentaries, his story a rallying cry for the American West. Sam Redhawk approached, his boots crunching on the frost. Tribal council's planning a ceremony next month, he said, his voice warm. They're naming the preserve a sacred site, tying it to our ancestors' stories. Thunderheart's more than a buffalo now, he's a symbol. Lena nodded, her throat tight. Her grandmother's tales had woven bison into the fabric of her people's history, symbols of resilience, of the land's heartbeat. Thunderheart had brought those stories to life, bridging past and present. She thought of the moment she'd touched his coat, felt his trust, and how it had changed her. She'd been a scientist, driven by data, but Thunderheart had taught her about love, about trust that transcended species. Her fight for him had healed her own doubts. giving her a purpose that felt as vast as the prairie itself. As the sun sank lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, Lena walked to the preserve's fence. Thunderheart lifted his head, his ears twitching, and ambled toward her. The herd parted, their bellows soft, as if honoring his approach. He stopped close, his massive head lowering until his muzzle brushed her outstretched hand. The warmth of his breath, the roughness of his fur, grounded her. She looked into his eyes, deep, knowing, filled with a quiet strength, and felt a connection that words couldn't capture. "You showed us the way," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You reminded us what matters." The preserve was alive with activity, researchers setting up cameras, school children sketching bison under the guidance of tribal elders, a documentary crew filming the herd's movements. Thunderheart's legacy was everywhere. In the policies protecting his kind, in the children learning their heritage, in the scientists rethinking animal intelligence. But for Lena, it was this moment, his breath on her hand, the prairie stretching before them, that held the deepest truth. She opened her journal, its pages filled with sketches of Thunderheart, notes on his behavior, and reflections on his impact. The final page held a single sentence, written in her grandmother's flowing script: "The bison carries our stories, and we carry theirs." Lena closed the book, her heart full, and looked out at the valley. The bison herd moved as one, their hooves a steady drumbeat, their bellows a song of endurance. To you, reading this story, Thunderheart's legacy is a call to action. His compassion, his sacrifice, reminds us that the wild is not separate from us, it is us. Have you ever felt a connection to an animal, a moment when their eyes met yours and you saw something more? Thunderheart's story asks you to honor that connection. Support conservation efforts, whether through donating to sanctuaries like this one, advocating for wildlife protections, or simply sharing his tale. Visit a preserve, learn about the creatures who shape our world, and ask yourself, what can you do to protect the wild places, the sacred bonds that Thunderheart fought for? As the last light faded, Lena touched the fence, her fingers lingering where Thunderheart's muzzle had been. His silhouette stood stark against the twilight, a guardian of the plains, a symbol of what was possible when compassion crossed boundaries. His bellow echoed once more, a deep, resonant call that seemed to speak to the stars themselves. Let his story move you. Let it remind you that love, trust, and resilience know no species, no limits. Carry Thunderheart's legacy forward, protect the wild, cherish the unexpected connections, and never stop listening to the heartbeat of the land.